Hello, my name is Taya Graham, and welcome to the Police Accountability Report. As I never get tired of saying, this show has one purpose and one purpose only: holding police accountable. But that process is not just about exposing bad behavior by police. We also examine the political power structure that makes misconduct possible, and most importantly, we put them on notice that we are watching. And I want you watching to know that if you have evidence of police misconduct or brutality, please share it with us and we might be able to investigate. Please reach out to us. You can email us tips privately at par@therealnews.com and share your evidence of police misconduct. You can also message us at Police Accountability Report on Facebook or Instagram, or at Eyes on Police on Twitter. And of course, you can message me directly at Taya's Baltimore on Twitter and Facebook. And please like and comment. You know I read your comments and that I appreciate them. So now back to today's topic. We're going to start the show by asking a question. As we all know, in some sense, American policing has never been under more intense scrutiny. Almost daily, a cell phone video and body camera footage emerges that reveals misconduct, malfeasance, or downright stupidity. Case in point is the video we're showing you right now of a recent arrest by Baltimore police. The video captures Baltimore police officer Joe Riley putting resident David Dixon in a chokehold. As the arrest unfolds, he's approached by a bystander, prompting the officer to grab his gun and make a threat. Let's watch.
Step back. Pull it out. Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back. Stop fighting. You're choking him, bitch. Let him go. Put your hand behind your back.
You choking me, sir?
Put your hand behind your back.
You choking me?
You're fighting. Stop.
All right, look.
Put this hand behind your back now. Give it to my sergeant. I got it.
The arrest has stoked controversy in the city, especially because Baltimore Police Department is already under a federal consent decree for using racist and unconstitutional tactics. But even more revealing is the response to the image you are watching right now. That's because Stephen asked Commissioner Harrison to comment on the video, and his answer was very revealing.
Wrong of Officer Riley arresting David Dixon, because there's been a lot of controversy in the community.
Well, first of all, I have seen the video, and the head of my Public Integrity Bureau has seen it. The video has been turned over to the Public Integrity Bureau for an internal investigation, so it would be highly improper, irregular, and unethical for me to comment on my views of it during this investigation stage.
So, Stephen, let me ask you a question. Do police use the same sort of circumspect language when they're talking about a citizen engaging in violence?
That's what's really revealing about this, because no, police are pretty much used to parading our images on the screen and saying this person did this, what they did is horrible, even before a trial occurs. But in this case, the commissioner doesn't want to comment on the behavior of an officer that is clearly causing controversy in the community. So no, emphatically no, they have no problem, but for some reason, and I think it shows the power of the police unions.
Now, doesn't the police commissioner have a right to call out a police officer who's engaging in misconduct or embarrassing the department?
Very succinctly, it's a paramilitary organization. So the police commissioner has every right to say what you are doing is wrong. It's not even a democracy. So yes, a police commissioner can say whatever he wants about any troop. The problem is the police union is lurking in the background. They have more power than the mayor or the police commissioner, arguably.
And that idea brings us to our next story, because in the same sense, it's a lack of accountability that makes the story I'm about to tell you possible. It starts on this isolated stretch of road in Worcester County in May of 2019. A motorcyclist who is black had pulled over to the side of the road after nearly colliding with a car that had moved into his lane. Soon, several patrol cars, which had been pursuing him for allegedly speeding, were on the scene. But it's what happened after the cyclist came to a full stop that is also the subject of this report, because what happened next is troubling, to say the least. I'll let the witness we spoke to tell the story. And just a note, the witness asked us to protect her identity because of fear of retaliation.
We came home from grocery shopping and we pulled into our driveway, and my family and I were getting out of the car, and we heard just this horrific bang. And I heard some sirens, and my husband walked out to the road, and what happened was there was a guy on a motorcycle, and there were two cop cars, like one was in front of him and one was in back of him, and they already had weapons withdrawn. And then there was a third cop car that came around the bend where the accident was, and I'd say it was about a half mile, maybe not quite, but they had quite a good amount of time to kind of slow down, and they didn't slow down, and the cop car came in between the other two cars and hit the motorcycle and the guy that was leaning on a motorcycle, and the bike went flying, and he went flying up in the air to about the tree line and came down, and then just everything. About 10 cop cars showed up, 3 ambulances, some fire trucks. It was awful. Like, I couldn't stop crying until I finally found out that the guy's possibly at home with his mom. I thought that he was gone. And I just couldn't stop thinking about his family. And if they were chasing him for a reason, I understand that, but he wasn't posing any threat to them. He had given up. His hands were up when this guy hit him. And it was awful. It was traumatic for me, for my whole family.
But her stunning recounting of what happened is not the end of the story, because after we spoke to her, we began looking into what happened. And at first, we hit a lot of dead ends. Stephen, can you talk about the process and what was being hidden from the public?
Well, usually when there's an accident or, let's say, a collision involving a police cruiser and a person, there's a press release issued on the website. There should be a press release, something to the public acknowledging something occurred. But there was nothing. There was no sign this even occurred. In fact, even the local media hadn't covered it. The only thing we had was a post on Facebook and this witness. And so we didn't know anything. Then we went and we searched the medevac records, which is, a medevac helicopter. We'll show pictures on the screen right now that we found from a volunteer fire department that just happened to post them. Right. Not official, nothing from official sources, completely silent. And those pictures showed a medevac helicopter, part of our medevac system, which is run by our state police. Medevacing this person that we didn't know who they were, or what happened to them, to emergency medical system for surgery. So basically, we kind of had to piece things together, and there was no public or official acknowledgement of what had happened.
So isn't the Maryland State Police actually supposed to write in a log when a medevac helicopter is used?
Any, aircraft governed by the FAA is supposed to file like a flight plan, and then you should be able to trace it by the tail number. But in this case, we couldn't find anything. So it was very unusual. It was very weird.
First, the Sheriff's Department said very little to us, and a medevac search turned up nothing. But through persistence, we started to make headway and eventually caught a break. Once we were able to speak to the lawyer of the victim, and 2, we obtained this, an accident report, a document which was very revealing. So take a look at the diagram on your screen right now. As you can see, the investigating officer drew a sketch of the position and trajectory of the vehicles prior, during, and after the crash. What is notable is how the sheriff's vehicle crossed 2 lanes of traffic, then crashed into the motorcycle, which was stationary, and hit it with such force it continued down the road. Stephen, what does this diagram tell you?
Well, it tells me that this was no accident. Like, this wasn't something where a motorcycle comes to an abrupt stop and the guy's trailing behind him and just happens to hit him, because he had to cross over, according to this diagram, had to cross over 2 lanes of traffic. And it appears from the diagram that the motorcycle is stationary at the time of the collision. So those 2 elements, the fact that the vehicle had to cross over and the fact that the motorcycle was stationary, tell me that this was not like something where, oh, I just happened to be chasing you and you stopped abruptly and I couldn't stop myself and ran into you.
So wasn't the victim actually off his motorcycle and trying to stand up his fallen motorcycle when he was hit by the police car?
Yeah, according to his lawyer, he actually had come to a complete stop and was trying to right his motorcycle at the moment that he was hit by this deputy. So yes, according to his lawyer, the person who represented him, yes, he would come to a complete stop. He was not moving, and that's when he got hit. So that does raise a lot of troubling questions.
Now, the victim did not want to speak to us on the record, but through his lawyer, we learned just how serious this collision was. The victim had to be taken by medevac helicopter to the Shock Trauma Emergency Medical Center here in Baltimore. That's because the force of the impact nearly severed his femoral artery. Just so you know, the femoral artery is in the upper part of the leg, and if it's severed, you can bleed to death in minutes. Oddly, despite the severity of the accident, the near-fatal injuries, and clearly troubling questions about what occurred, the police investigator simply classified the accident as preventable. In fact, the Worcester County Sheriff's Office still hasn't released an official statement about the accident, only telling us it was under investigation off the record. But there was another piece of evidence that raises even more questions. What you're seeing on the screen are the charges against the cyclist, and they are numerous. 25 separate traffic violations, speeding, driving the wrong way, evading the police, et cetera, et cetera. A list so long that is both confounding and telling. That's because when the case came to trial, all the charges were dropped. All of them. All the victim had to pay was a single speeding ticket. Stephen, what does that tell you?
Well, this is generally the case you see where the police are in some way wrong, because what they do is they overcharge, and then when it comes to trial, in a way to sort of intimidate the victim, and then when it comes to trial, when they realize they have no evidence and things look really bad, they drop everything. I mean, especially because they were sitting on that accident report, which said it was so-called preventable, meaning that they knew they were in the wrong. So if he had done any of those crimes, or if he had truly been being chased and what happened, was not wrong, they would have charged him, and this is Worcester County, they would have charged him and prosecuted those charges to the full extent of the law. The fact that they dropped them is extremely telling.
So let's review the facts. A sheriff's deputy crossed 2 lanes of traffic and drove onto the side of the road, striking a parked motorcyclist. Witnesses describe watching the car drive past 2 parked cruisers and crashing into the motorcyclist unprovoked. The injuries to the cyclist are so severe, the victim had to be airlifted for emergency surgery. And finally, an investigation concludes that the collision was avoidable or preventable. Stephen, what are we missing from this picture?
Well, what we're missing is the fact that there should have been probably a criminal investigation. I mean, you don't have the right to just strike someone with your car. If you're angry with them, whether you're a sheriff's deputy or a person, whatever, it seems that there are suggestions, allegations, and enough evidence to investigate whether or not this was premeditated. But of course, we have nothing. We have silence. We have no press release, nothing from the sheriff's department. They won't respond to comments. I looked at my emails from the Maryland State Police, which run the medevac system. They said they had no knowledge of this flight. So what we have,
no other media has reported on this, have they?
No one else has reported on it. So you have what I would say is in some sense a cover-up, right? I mean, there should be some public pronouncement. If they decide that the deputy did the right thing, then they should say that. But if they feel like there's more to this, they should investigate it. And they certainly don't have problems investigating people down the Eastern Shore. So I would say that, it raises a lot of questions of why a broader and more, specific investigation wasn't done.
I'm not an expert in the legal system, but I have a feeling that if you were driving a car, switched 2 lanes and aimed your car towards a motorcyclist and hit them, you would be charged with attempted vehicular homicide. Does that sound about right?
I would think absolutely, with the evidence that you have, that it would be very possible that you would be at least subject to an investigation, or at least that police and prosecutors would take a look at it, if at the very least. I don't know what their conclusions would be, and I don't know what their conclusion would be in this case, but the main thing is they're not looking at it at all. And I think that is extremely problematic, and one of the reasons we need media to cover this stuff, and also one of the reasons that police, have so many problems, I think, because they don't investigate their own very well.
What's most notable is how easily the Worcester County Sheriff's Department has avoided scrutiny. There was no information offered to the public, no media accounts, no public vetting of the investigation. Instead, there was only a Facebook post and us. Which is why the next story is so critical. It's a tale so disturbing, I'm going to describe it as a hypothetical. It's a story that has everything to do with the aforementioned lack of accountability, a story that only reiterates problems with police policing themselves in Worcester County. Imagine if you hold so much power over a community, you could on a whim take a person's freedom without giving it a second thought. That you were so omnipotent, you had the power to both make the laws and enforce them. And armed with both, you could detain or otherwise incarcerate anyone at any time, which you did. And for all of this, you were called a hero. You were promoted, and you were paid more than enough to be part of the top 2%. I know it sounds incredible. It sounds like a sense of power that would be ripe for abuse. But Stephen, the scenario I laid out actually happened.
Yeah, Sergeant Ethan Newberg, who was a, 30-year veteran of the force?
I think 24 years.
24-year veteran of the force, was indicted on 32 counts of false imprisonment and assault for committing 9 separate illegal arrests over a 6-month period that were captured on body cam. He arrested people for nothing, people sitting in their house saying they were interfering with an officer. A FedEx guy he arrested and then tried to make him lose his job. But the underlying imperative here that's important that we mentioned is Sergeant Newberg, as you mentioned, is part of the top 2%.
Top
he makes
2%.
$250,000 a year. Now, we all know there's a history in the Baltimore City Police Department of paying people for making arrests. Officers in the Gun Trace Task Force, which is one of the most corrupt units, which was 8 officers charged with, robbing residents, stealing drugs, et cetera, and stealing overtime, got paid extra pay for finding a gun and arresting someone. Right. So they incentivized arrests. In the case of Ethan Newberg, given his salary, it is easy to make the connection between him making arrests and getting paid. And it is really troubling to see in our American law enforcement, or it is actually I think, important to see that this incentivized arrest process actually makes the criminal justice system subject to the monetization that we see in every other facet of American life, like healthcare. All the other places where inequality touches our lives, we see this in policing, right? Because Ethan Newberg's making $250,000 a year.
Right.
Look it up, top
Over
2%.
$250,000
Over
a year.
$250,000, and he's arresting people illegally. You're telling me there's not a connection? There's absolutely a connection. Our criminal justice system in Baltimore, one of the poorest cities in the country that doesn't have heat for its classrooms or air conditioning, was paying this man $250,000 a year to illegally arrest people.
Right.
Think of how twisted, perverse, destructive that is. It's unfathomable.
So let's think for a second and ask ourselves something basic so that we envision a world where policing is not the dominant government institution it is today, where cops don't need to be lauded constantly as heroes or paid astronomical overtime or expensive lifetime pensions, or control how they themselves are policed when the community should come first. And our rights are more valuable than the power of the badge. And the constant need to arrest us for money and glory no longer exists. Does it sound unachievable? Perhaps, but it can happen. Police can be held accountable, and policing can change as long as there are people like you out there, our viewers, people who are not afraid to stand up and be counted, people who share tips with us and comment, people who are willing not to just view police as either all good or bad, but as an institution that serves us and therefore should answer to us. That's why we do this show, and that's why we appreciate you, because together we can make both policing and by extension our communities better. I'd like to thank my co-host Stephen Janis for his reporting and his invaluable help with this piece. And I want you watching to know that if you have evidence of police misconduct or brutality, please share it with us and we might be able to investigate. Reach out. You can email us privately at par@therealnews.com and share your evidence of police misconduct. Or of course, you can message me directly at Tejas Baltimore on Twitter or Facebook. And please like and comment. You know I read your comments, respond to them, and appreciate them. My name is Taya Graham, and I would like to thank you for watching the Police Accountability Report. Be safe out there.